My name is Sani, and I sold my soul for college admissions. And honestly, I would do it again. By the end of sophomore year, I had a 3.5 GPA, which is, like, by the way, not at all competitive for any good institution in America. And fast forward 2 years, I applied to 50 schools and I got into around 30. This isn't a guide, and I have absolutely nothing to sell. It's just a story of how I figured out that college admissions is a game with rules, exploits, and strategies, and how I decided to stop playing fair and start playing smart, so to speak. And look, I know how that sounds, but stick with me here, because what I'm about to tell you is not just about getting into college. It's about learning to see systems for what they really are and figuring out how to win them. So let me take you back to the end of sophomore year. My life, to put it mildly, was a complete disaster. My dad had just survived a heart attack that doctors said would probably kill him. Like, they gave him like a 90% chance of dying in the first year. They called it a widowmaker, which is a terrifying term for a specific type of heart attack that's usually fatal. And I'm sitting with him in this hospital for months, like sleeping on these terrible chairs, seeing these machines keeping him alive, and I'm just thinking about everything, about my life, and about what I've been doing with my life. About the fact that I basically wasted 2 years of high school being the lazy, directionless kid who didn't care about anything. I was that kid who would pay other people to do my homework. I was that kid who would make up excuses about religious holidays to get out of assignments. And I basically treated school like it was some sort of joke. And at some point, sitting there in that hospital, I checked my grades for basically the first time since middle school. And I had a 3.5 GPA. And that number just stared back at me from my phone screen. And it kind of hit me like a truck. Because I realized I had potential. I'd always known, like, somewhere deep down that I was capable of more, but I had just been coasting it. Wasting it and throwing it away on nothing. And suddenly, with my dad lying there and machines keeping him alive, I understood that time is finite and you can't just drift through life expecting things to work out. At some point, you actually have to do something. So when my dad came home, and thank God he did come home because the odds were really not in his favor, I did something that might sound weird. I took a blank piece of paper and I sat down and I wrote everything that was wrong with my life. Everything. No sugarcoating, no excuses. It was just brutal honesty. And it looked something like this. So a 3.5 GPA, completely not competitive for any school I'd actually want to go to, 0 meaningful extracurriculars. Like, I wasn't in any clubs that mattered. I hadn't shown up to anything impressive. I had nothing to put on a college application except showed up to school sometimes. No research experience, which matters a lot if you want to do anything STEM related. No leadership positions. I had nothing. I'd never led anything in my life. My first 2 years of high school looked like they were completed by someone who genuinely did not care about their future. No strategy for improving any of this. Like, I knew things were bad, but I just had no idea how to fix them. 2 years of high school wasted, it's just completely gone, and I could not get that time back. I stared at that list for a very long time. I stared at that list for a while, actually, and it was really depressing. But it was also, like, clarifying. Because for the first time, I could see exactly what the problems were. Not vague feelings of I should do better, like actual specific problems that could theoretically be solved. And then I did something that changed everything for me. I started researching. Not just Googling how to get into college and like reading the first 3 results on there. I mean, like, really researching, like deep research, hours and hours of research. I treated it like I was studying a video game before like attempting a speedrun. I wanted to understand every single mechanic, like every exploit, every single optimal strategy of college admissions. I spent weeks reading everything I could about college admissions, like Reddit threads from actual admissions officers, statistical analysis of acceptance rates broken down by application round, breakdowns of how GPA calculations actually work at different schools, or the difference between weighted and unweighted grades, or how course rigor is evaluated, or how demonstrated interest or early decision changes your odds. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to see the big picture. It's the game. The actual literal game with rules and optimal strategies that nobody tells you about because everyone's too busy pretending college admissions is about being yourself and following your passion and other vague advice. And just for the record, I believe that that type of advice gets you absolutely nowhere. Here's what nobody tells you. College admissions is not some mystical process where the best students magically rise to the top. It's a system. It's a complex system with rules, like specific incentives and specific ways to optimize your chances. And like any system, once you understand how it works, you can exploit it. Not by cheating or not by lying, but by making strategic choices that work within the rules to maximize your outcomes. Let me give you some examples of what I discovered. You can take the exact same AP class in different places, but the difficulty is completely different. Like AP Physics C at my competitive high school, that class had a reputation for destroying GPAs if you weren't like dead set on doing physics for the rest of your life or engineering. The average grade was like probably a B-. The teacher was brutal and the curve was harsh. Taking that class was like basically volunteering to tank your GPA. But here's the thing. You could take the same class online through your state's virtual school program. It counts exactly the same on your transcript. It's the same AP exam in the end, but the online version is way more forgiving. The curves are better, the teacher's more lenient, the whole setup is just easier to ace, and colleges, most of the time, have no idea which version you took, and it doesn't matter even if they do. Because at the end of the day, it still shows up as AP Physics C on your transcript. So I took all of my hardest classes online, like the ones that would have killed my GPA if I had taken them in person at my high school. And I kept the easy stuff at school. The honors electives that are usually free A's, the lighter APs like psychology, stuff like AP Computer Science Principles, AP Computer Science A, AP Environmental Science. Is that gaming the system? Absolutely. Is it against the rules? Absolutely not. It's using the rules to your advantage. Community college classes count for college credit. They boost your transcript, they show colleges that you're taking initiative and challenging yourself beyond high school, and that's what makes them amazing. You're not competing against the top students in your competitive high school district. You're in classes with all sorts of people. I think my first community college class, there was a 40-year-old in there, and there was also like a 12-year-old. You're in classes with people of all different levels. The grading is generally more generous, the workload is like more manageable, and you're knocking out requirements that you'd have to take in college anyway. So you're getting college credit, boosting your high school transcript, and making your future college life easier, all while working in an environment that's less cutthroat than your high school. I took all my gen ed requirements at community college. English composition, intro to sociology, stuff like that, like easy A's that counted as college level coursework on my applications. And again, is this gaming the system? Absolutely. Is it against the rules? No. It is literally just understanding the system, how it works, and making optimal choices. Okay, this is a big one. The exploit that most people do not fully understand. Early decision. If you apply early decision to a school, you're kind of committing to attend. It's binding, but it's only binding by that college. So you should always use your early decision. You can only apply ED to one school at a time, and if you get in, you don't necessarily have to go there. It's like a college binding thing. So most people understand that much. What they don't understand is how dramatically early decision changes your odds actually. I'm talking about acceptance rates that are sometimes 2 to 4 times higher than regular decision. And that's not a small boost. Like that could be the difference between getting in and not getting in for a student that's about the average threshold for getting into one of those schools. Let me give you a very specific example. Cornell University, right? It's an Ivy League school, very prestigious, very competitive. If you apply to Cornell regular decision, your acceptance rate is somewhere around 4 to 6%, depending on the year and the college within Cornell. Those are like brutal odds. Like you would have to be a superstar to have a shot. But if you apply early decision to Cornell's College of Human Ecology, the acceptance rate is nearly 40%. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between basically impossible and actually like pretty reasonable if you're a solid candidate. And this pattern exists at a ton of schools. Early decision acceptance rates are consistently way higher than regular decision rates. Sometimes double, sometimes triple, sometimes even more. And why is that? Because schools use early decision to lock in students and protect their yield rate, which matters a lot for rankings. If you apply ED and get in, they pretty much know you're coming. They're counting on you coming. That's guaranteed enrollment, and they love that for their rankings. So early decision is basically the college admissions equivalent of pay to win, except instead of paying with money, you're paying with commitment. You're giving up the ability to compare financial aid offers, but in return, you're getting a massive return on investment, and you're getting a huge boost to your acceptance odds as well. Once I understood this, it completely changed my strategy. I wasn't just going to apply to schools I liked and hope for the best. I was going to identify which schools had the best early decision acceptance rates and figure out which ones aligned with my profile and interests and make strategic choices about where to apply and when. Here's something else I discovered in my research. Admissions officers read thousands of applications. Thousands. They're not spending an hour carefully analyzing each one. They're skimming. They're looking for reasons to say yes or reasons to say no. And here's what makes someone memorable: a clear narrative. If your activities list looks scattered or random, and if it seems like you just joined a bunch of clubs because you thought you were supposed to, if there's no coherent theme to what you're doing, they'll just forget you. They'll eat your application in the trash. But if everything connects, and if every activity, class, and achievement tells one cohesive story about who you are and what you want to do, that's when they start paying attention. So I realized I didn't need to be the best at everything. As a matter of fact, I didn't need to be the best at anything. I just needed to be strategically focused. I needed to build a character, essentially. Like I was creating a build in an RPG and adding skill points to it. And that's when I started thinking about my application profile the same way I think about optimizing a character in a video game. What's my class? What are my stats? What abilities am I going to focus on? And how do I make everything come together? It sounds absolutely cynical, but once I started thinking this way, everything became clearer for me. So I took another piece of paper and I wrote down what my narrative was going to be. Neuroscience and human behavior. That was my thing. That was what I'd been genuinely interested in since I was a kid, probably 6th grade. I'd always been fascinated by the brain, by consciousness, by understanding why people think the way they think and do things the way they do. So everything I did from that point forward had to connect to that narrative. Research, neuroscience research on teenage decision making and risk assessment. It just sounds like a bunch of buzzwords, I know. Volunteering, you do hospital volunteering and shadowing doctors. You do a lot of cold emailing. Leadership, I got my friends to go in the clubs that I'm in and vote me in, and we would kind of cycle through that. So I was the president of DECA and the research club, and I said I focused on the psychological aspects of business and marketing, understanding consumer behavior and decision making. Once again, a bunch of buzzwords. I built an art platform with my friend David, but framed it around understanding what makes content go viral and how algorithms work, or I would say the psychology of engagement. And everything connected. Everything told the same story. There's a kid who's obsessed with understanding human behavior. He wants to study neuroscience. He wants to go into medicine eventually. He's shown interest through all of these things: research, volunteering, leadership, creativity. That is a narrative. Now, I think that is memorable. That's the kind of application that makes an admissions officer think, okay, this kid knows what they want and they've been working towards it. And is it authentic? Yeah. Actually, I was genuinely interested in all that stuff, but I was also very intentional about how I pursued those interests and how I presented them. Junior year, I loaded up my schedule with everything I could possibly handle. AP classes at school, online classes through the state virtual program, community college classes. I took 14 classes at once, sometimes more, and my strategy was simple: maximize GPA gains while minimizing actual difficulty. You take the hard stuff where it's easier and take the easy stuff where it's visible on your transcript, and then build everything around that narrative that you choose. The first summer between sophomore and junior year, I started my first research project. I spent 3 months writing this research paper about teenage decision making. And look, it was really hard. There were nights I wanted to give up, nights I thought I'm not even smart enough for this, I do not know what I'm doing. I was genuinely thinking, I'm just a high school kid pretending to be a researcher. But I kept going, I kept analyzing data and writing and rewriting. And when that paper got published in an undergrad research journal, that was the moment I realized this strategy was actually working. So I wrote 3 papers in total by the end of my high school career. But here's the thing for research papers: they're pretty much gold for college applications, especially if you're applying to STEM, and especially if they're published. It shows that you can do real independent work and that you can contribute to a field even as a high school student. But the biggest point you should take out of this is that everyone is pretending. There's not one single real researcher that would get real research published in an undergrad research journal or a graduate research journal. They don't have any citations. How are they going to do that? It doesn't make any sense. So everyone is just as confused and everyone is just as inauthentic in that sense. I also started that art platform with my friend David. We'd always been really good at social media, like weirdly good. We understood what made content go viral, what made people engage, and how algorithms work. So we built this art collective where we'd help artists get seen. We weren't actually that good at art ourselves, so we just helped other people get seen. We grew it to millions of likes and hundreds of thousands of followers, and it felt good because we were actually helping people. But I'm not gonna lie to you, I also knew it looked incredible on applications. Creative director of an art agency with millions of likes and hundreds of thousands of followers across platforms. That is resume gold. That is the type of thing that makes you stand out. So everything connected to a narrative, neuroscience research, medical volunteering, leadership in business and psychology related clubs, community service focused on mental health, it all told one coherent story about who I was and what I wanted to do. And my GPA shot up from a 3.5 unweighted to about a 3.85 unweighted by the end of junior year. Not because I suddenly became smarter, but because I understood the system well enough to exploit it. The SAT was its own separate game that needed to be mastered. And here's what most people don't understand about taking the SAT. It's not testing your knowledge, it's testing how good you are at taking the SAT. That's pretty much it. That's the whole game. I learned every single function of Desmos, the graphing calculator that's built into the digital SAT, how to solve equations faster and visualize complex functions, how to check my work efficiently. I studied the test itself more than I studied the content. Because the SAT is not about its content, it's about patterns. It's about recognizing question types. And it's about knowing exactly what they're gonna ask and exactly how to answer. And when I hit a 1550, that felt like proof of concept for me. You can master anything if you understand how it works. You just have to treat it like the game it is. Senior year was all about execution. I took 9 AP classes, more college classes on the side, more research projects. I was sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours a night, but I wasn't just working hard. I was trying to work smart. Every single hour I spent was optimized. Every single choice I made was strategic. The essays were where everything came together for me, because for the first time, I had something real to write about. I wrote about my dad's heart attack and how it woke me up, how it made me realize I've been wasting my potential, and how it pushed me to transform my entire life. And it was authentic. Every single word was true. But I also workshopped that essay through probably 30 drafts. I made sure it hit every emotional beat and showed growth and resilience and purpose and transformation, all of that. Because that's what admissions officers want to see. They don't just want to know what you've done. They want to see that you've changed. That it's like a protagonist's journey. Like they want character development. And that's exactly what I gave them. Then came the final boss of college admissions, the application strategy itself. I applied to 50 schools, which sounds like absolutely insane. Every single school served a purpose. I had safety schools where I knew I'd get in and I'd probably get merit scholarships purely based on my test scores and GPA. I had target schools where my stats put me right in their middle 50% range. Schools where I was competitive but not guaranteed, basically. And then I had reach schools, a lot of reach schools. Ivies, top 20s, places where my stats were good but not exceptional and I need everything else to carry me. But the key move, the move that made everything work, was early decision. I researched ED acceptance rates at every single school I was interested in. I made spreadsheets, I calculated probabilities, I figured out where I'd have the best odds. And I found out that Cornell's College of Human Ecology had one of the highest early decision acceptance rates of any Ivy League program. According to my personal calculations, I believe it was around 30%. Was Cornell my dream school? Not exactly. But it was an Ivy League with a strong neuroscience program and a human development focus that aligned perfectly with my narrative. And the ED acceptance rate meant I had a real legitimate shot, which was crazy. So Cornell became my ED1, not because I was in love with the school, but because it was the most strategically optimal choice. And I had my backup plan ready. If Cornell didn't work out, I had ED2 lined up for NYU. Because NYU also has significantly higher acceptance rates for ED2 compared to regular decision. And according to a regression model I graphed, they would start giving out about 40% more merit scholarships that year. This is what I mean by gaming the system. I wasn't just hoping to get lucky. I was playing the numbers and calculating probabilities. I was making moves that maximized my chances of success. I also had to think about grade inflation versus deflation, which was something I was a little bit too late to for Cornell. Because here's something pre-meds need to know. Medical schools care way more about your GPA and MCAT score than where you went to college. A 3.9 from a less prestigious school beats a 3.4 from an Ivy League school every single time when you're applying to medical school. So even though I got into Cornell, I had to factor in that Cornell is notorious for grade deflation, especially in science classes. NYU, on the other hand, has more manageable curves. Not easy by any means, but more reasonable for someone on the pre-med track. That ended up being part of why I ultimately chose NYU. A very good scholarship, strong neuroscience program, better grading curves for pre-med. It was the strategic choice. Application season itself was brutal, I'm not gonna lie. There were nights I'd be up until 3 a.m. working on supplementals, but every single essay was tailored. Every essay showed exactly why I wanted to go to each specific school. I'd research their programs, their professors, their traditions and values, and I'd weave that into my writing so it felt personal and specific. Because honestly, admissions officers can tell when you're recycling the same generic essay for every single school, and they hate it. So December came, early decision results, and I got into Cornell. I remember reading that email and just laughing out loud because it felt so surreal. 2 years ago, I was paying other kids to do my homework. I had a 3.5 GPA and zero meaningful accomplishments. And now an Ivy League school wanted me. Then more acceptances started rolling in, more scholarships, opportunities. NYU came through with a scholarship. Carnegie Mellon, Johns Hopkins, Notre Dame, all these incredible schools that I never would have dreamed of back in sophomore year. 30-something acceptances out of 50 applications, most of them with full rides or massive scholarships. I chose NYU in the end. It had a strong program and a strong scholarship and better positioning for med school. The strategic choice for me. My dad opened those acceptance letters with me. The same dad who was supposed to die 3 years ago, who doctors said had a 90% chance of not making it through the first year. And that moment, like sitting there, reading those acceptances together, that was everything. Because we both survived something that should have broken us. So looking back at those 2 years, junior year and senior year, do I regret any of it? Honestly, no. Not at all. Yeah, I gamed the system. Absolutely. I exploited every loophole I could find. I made strategic choices at every turn. I optimized everything. But here's the thing. I did it all within the rules. Every class I took was legitimate. Every grade I earned was real. Every activity I participated in was genuine. I just made strategic choices about where and when and how to do things. That's not cheating and that's not lying. That's just being smart about how you play the game. And the thing is, college admissions is a game whether you want to admit it or not. It has rules, it has strategies, it has optimal moves. Most people just don't want to acknowledge that. They want to pretend it's this pure meritocracy where the best students naturally rise to the top if they just work hard and be themselves. But that's not how it works. That's never been how this works. The students who get to the top aren't necessarily the smartest or hardest working. They're the ones who understand the system best. The ones who know how to present themselves strategically. The ones who know which boxes to check and how to check them efficiently. I just decided to stop pretending the game didn't exist and actually learn how to play it. And some people might look at that and say I was being cynical, that I sold my soul, that college admissions should be about authenticity and passion, not strategy and optimization. And to those people I'd say, and this is going to cause a fight in the comments, you're just playing it badly. You can either play the game blindly, hoping that working hard or being yourself will somehow be enough, Or you can actually study the system and understand how it works, and make strategic choices that maximize your odds of success. And once you get to a position where you're successful, you can go back and try to fight that system that's completely broken in the first place. Now, I'm choosing the second option, and it worked out for me. But here's the thing that no one tells you about selling your soul to game the system. It actually makes you better. I didn't just learn how to get into college. I learned how to analyze a complex system and find an optimal path through it. I learned how to work efficiently. And those skills are honestly going to matter way more in life than which college I attended or what my GPA was, because life is full of systems. Your career is a system, networking is a system, finance is a system. Literally everything you want to achieve exists within some sort of structure with rules and incentives and optimal strategies. So most people just muddle through, hoping things work out, thinking that hard work alone is enough. But the people who really succeed, they're the ones who figure out how the system works and exploit it. Within the rules, legally, ethically, and morally, 100% morally, but strategically. That's what I learned, not just how to get into college, but how to see systems for what they really are and figure out how to win them. And now I'm here at NYU, doing research I actually love. Let me just turn this around real quick. And I'm taking classes that challenge me. And yeah, it's hard work, but I know how to work hard now. More importantly, I know how to work smart. I know how to look at a complex system and figure out the optimal path through it. So, I turned my entire life around in 2 years. A 3.5 GPA kid who was paying other people to do his homework to a scholarship to an elite university with acceptance to 30 schools, including the Ivy League. If I can do that, then anyone can turn their life around. You just have to be willing to do it. You have to take that piece of paper and write down everything that's wrong. Every problem, every obstacle, every weakness. And then you actually have to research how to solve those problems. Not by working harder, by working smarter. Figure out where the exploits are. Figure out what the optimal strategies are, and figure out how to play the game better than everyone else who's just stumbling through hoping for the best. And definitely stop pretending the game doesn't exist. Stop pretending that hard work and authenticity are enough on their own. Most of the time, they're not. You need optimization. So the title of this video says I sold my soul for elite college admissions. Did I? Maybe. In a way, I definitely made sacrifices. I slept 4 or 5 hours a night for 2 years. I gave up a lot of my social life. I spent countless hours on things that were strategic rather than things I might have just done for fun. But here's what I got in return. Self-respect. Real skills that will serve me for the rest of my life. A future that's exciting instead of terrifying. And honestly, that's worth so much more than the hypothetical soul that I might have traded away. And the version of me that exists now, that's a person that I would actually respect. That's someone who's probably ready for what comes next. And that's someone who didn't sell their soul. More like probably found it. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate the people who stuck around for this whole story. Give me suggestions in the comments for what to do for my next video. I'll probably post my stats. And I want to thank you guys so much for your support on the last video. Alright.